Before the smoke, there was silence. Before the rumble of wagons, the clang of iron shoes on cobblestone, the hiss of steam. There was the hush of gray. London, in the final hour before dawn, was a different creature. Still, cold, breathing shallowly in its sleep. It was 1851, the year of the Great Exhibition, the year of polished brass and dirty boots, the year Queen Victoria still ruled, and her people dreamed of progress and survival. But before all that, there was this moment, this quiet, this fog without motion. In a narrow alley near Whitechapel, a cat crept across a wall blackened with soot. Its paws made no sound on the stone. A sleeping man, wrapped in a worn coat and nothing else, lay curled beside an empty crate. His breath, when it came, rose like a ghost from his mouth and vanished into the mist. A few blocks away, the Thames rolled sluggishly under the weight of frost. The river was awake, always awake, but in these hours it kept its secrets. No steamboats yet, no shouts from bargemen, just the slow push of current against the city's ribs. Inside a bakery off Fleet Street, embers still glowed in the oven from the night before. A boy, no more than 12, stirred on a flour sack. His name was Henry. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but he didn't mind the hunger. Not yet. It would come later. Now it was the warmth he held on to, the glowing bricks, the scent of stale dough, the sound of nothing. It was the only time London let him rest. Across town, in a townhouse much grander, a maid named Edith struck flint to steel. Her hands were red with cold, cracked at the knuckles. The fireplace would not light. She tried again, and again. The master would be down by 6. He expected hot tea and firelight. He never asked how the fire was lit, only why it wasn't. Outside, a lamplighter turned the corner, pole in hand, lantern flickering. One by one, he snuffed the gas lamps along the street. Night was over, officially, but the day hadn't begun. This was the in-between. The city was not beautiful, not in the way postcards lie. It was gray and brown and black, 1,000 shades of used. But in this hour, it felt almost holy. The noise hadn't arrived. The smoke hadn't risen. The world still belonged to shadows. A rat scurried across a rooftop. A chimney sweep, no more than 8 years old, tugged on his boots in silence. He coughed. Once. Twice. Then didn't cough again. Habit. The bells would ring soon. Church bells, factory bells, market bells, all summoning someone, somewhere, to do something. But for now, there was only the low creak of rope on docked ships, the hush of wind through cracked glass, the slow inhale of a city just before it remembered it was alive. London was asleep, yes, but it would wake, and when it did, it would demand everything. Sweat, silence, speed, and soot, but not yet. Now there was only Henry in the bakery, curling tighter. Edith striking flint in vain. A river that didn't speak. And a million others, tucked into the folds of alley and atticless roof, holding their breath for the world to begin again. This was London, before the smoke. The city did not wake all at once. It stretched first, with the slow groan of wood, the distant rumble of wheels, the creak of leather straps and horse harnesses in motion. A cart rolled through the mud-thick street in Soho, its wheels catching on cobblestones, then freeing themselves with a wet snap. A man with frost in his beard snapped his reins and muttered into the cold. Behind him, a woman opened her shutters, eyes swollen from sleep. She coughed. The kind of cough that starts the day, not ends it. The kind that never really leaves. In Camden, the coal wagons began their route. The horses already knew the path. Turn left at the school. Pause near the bakery. The coalman banged his shovel against the side of the cart. Once, twice. Wake up. Time to pay. Inside a tenement, A mother shushed her children and pressed coins into a ragged cloth. There wasn't enough. There never was. She opened the door anyway. Heat, even for a day, was worth it. Across the river, at Billingsgate Market, the fishmongers arrived. Not with ceremony, not with noise. Just the stink of salt and sea and something older. Their boots sloshed through puddles of melted ice and yesterday's blood. They carried baskets. They carried knives. Some had slept in the stalls to save on rent. Others hadn't slept at all. By the time the sun crested the chimney tops, the eels were already on display, coiled like question marks in iron tubs, and the shouting had begun. Cod, fresh cod, still bleeding, I swear it. 4 for a penny, madam. Don't look at me like that, they've got gills. Further inland, in a narrow lane off Clerkenwell, a boy with no shoes swept the walk. He wasn't hired to. No one paid him. But he knew the shopkeeper would sometimes toss him a crust for the favor. He swept fast and quiet. Dust rose and caught the light. Behind him, a carriage clattered by, spraying slush onto the stone. The boy flinched, not from the cold, but from the man's voice. Out of the road, you little rat. The boy didn't respond. He just swept a little faster. Bells chimed. Not church bells, not yet. These were factory bells. Hollow, urgent. Their sound didn't call the faithful. It summoned the necessary. Boots hit staircases. Children grabbed bread with their teeth as they ran. Mothers shouted. Fathers grunted. In the textile mill, the foreman pulled the whistle chain. It shrieked. The whole neighborhood winced. Time to work. No one needed a clock. The city kept time in steam. On High Holborn, the milkman made his rounds. The bottles clinked against the crate with a song of their own. One of repetition, of necessity, of life moving forward whether or not you wanted it to. At number 42, no one opened the door. Again. He left the bottle anyway. He always did. One day someone would return. Or not. It didn't matter. The city didn't wait for answers. It only asked, what's next? In a narrow parlor near Lambeth, an old man buttoned his vest with hands that shook more than they used to. He looked out the window. Smoke was rising now, from chimneys, from factories, from fires lit too late. He sighed. London was awake. He could hear it in the wheels, the shouting, the rhythm of a city remembering its purpose. He lit a pipe with fingers that barely cooperated and whispered into the steam. Same as yesterday. The fog had not lifted, but it had thinned. Enough to see outlines, movements, the beginning of stories. It was now that London truly began. Not in celebration, not in grace, but in momentum. The smoke was coming, and everyone was already in motion. His name was Tom. At least, that's what the girl who shared his corner called him. He wasn't sure if it was his real name. He couldn't remember if anyone had ever said it before she did. But it stuck. Tom. Simple. Short. Useful. Tom had no shoes. Not because he lost them, or because he sold them, but because he never had them. His feet had grown tough. Tough enough to walk over broken glass without flinching. Tough enough to press into frozen stone without complaint. People stared sometimes. Most of the time, they didn't look at all. A boy with no shoes wasn't strange. Not in London. He slept in a nook beneath a stone stairwell near Covent Garden. By night, he curled beneath a sack that once held flour. By day, he walked. No destination. No plan. Just motion. Because motion meant warmth. Motion meant survival. He knew where the bakery scraps fell. He knew which butcher looked away. He knew which doorsteps had loose bricks, where people sometimes hid pennies. It was a kind of map, etched in instinct, passed from child to child without a word. That morning, Tom woke with a shiver sharp enough to make him bite his own lip. Blood. Warm. He licked it, then stood. The world was gray. The fog was thick. His stomach ached. He walked. He passed a tavern door where the night before men had spilled ale and secrets and the scent of burnt tobacco. The smell still lingered. He pressed his cheek to the wood. It was warm. A lie. He moved on. A woman with a wrapped basket stepped over him without pause. He didn't mind. He didn't expect kindness. He didn't remember what it felt like. But he remembered warmth. A loaf fresh from the oven. A steam cloud rising from stew. The sun on his shoulder. Rare, but real. He chased those moments, one at a time. At the alley near Drury Lane, he saw the girl, Mercy. She always stood near the grate. Steam rose there, from some underground pipe. She stood in it like royalty. Her hair was wild. Her coat was missing buttons. She smiled when she saw him. "Tom," she said. He nodded. She held out a crust. He took it, tore it in two, gave her back half. She didn't thank him. She never did. She just hummed. A song he didn't know, but always remembered once she started. They sat together for a while, not speaking, not moving, just sharing warmth and bread and breath. Then she stood. "I've got to check the butcher's." He nodded. She vanished into the smoke. And Tom wandered again. At the edge of the market, he spotted a boy not much older than him crying. New, clean coat, tidy hair, soft hands, lost. Tom approached. The boy flinched. Tom held up both palms. "Not robbing you," he muttered. The boy sniffled. "Where's your ma?" The boy shook his head. Tom sighed. "Stay here," he said. And he left. He didn't return. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to stay. Not in one place. Not with one person. That wasn't the kind of life the street let you live. By midday, the city was loud again. Too loud. Tom ducked into a cart, found a spot beneath sacks of something sweet-smelling. Sugar? Maybe flour. He curled up, dozed, dreamed. Not of food, not of family, but of feet in warm boots, of running without pain, of a name said like it mattered. And when the driver shouted and the cart lurched forward, Tom smiled, because for now, he was warm, and that was enough. They called him Mr. Kemp. Even the children did, not out of respect, though he deserved it, but because no one knew his first name. Some said it was Arthur. Others swore it was Henry. A drunk in Shoreditch once insisted it was Justice. Mr. Kemp never corrected anyone. He simply rang his bell, delivered the milk, and moved on. He'd been doing it for nearly 20 years. Same route, same cart, same bell. The bell was small, brass, with a chime so soft it could slip through a window without waking a baby, but sharp enough to stir the kitchen maids. That was the point. Not to announce himself, but to remind the city, milk is here. The day has begun. His horse's name was Molly. She was older than most of the buildings he passed. Slow, stubborn, but loyal. They moved in rhythm now. Hoof, creak, bell, hoof, creak, bell. Molly knew the turns before he did. She stopped at every doorstep without command. Some mornings he didn't speak at all. Not because he had no one to speak to, but because he didn't need words anymore. The city spoke enough for both of them. At number 17, the bottle was gone. As always. A new coin rested inside the crate, wrapped in a note. "Thank you, Mr. Kemp. The baby finally slept." He smiled, slightly. At number 22, no bottle. Hadn't been for months. Still, he left one. Old habits, he told himself. But part of him still watched that window, just in case it opened again. He remembered when that house held laughter. A woman with hair always in a rush. A man who wore mismatched socks. A child who banged spoons against the railings and waved. One by one, they vanished. Illness, debt, migration. He wasn't sure. They were just gone. London did that. It swallowed people, replaced them with silence. And still the milkman came. He rang the bell again, softly. At number 31, a dog barked. At number 47, the maid frowned. She didn't like milk. She'd told him so. But the lady did, and so the milk came. People forget how important routine is until it breaks. Mr. Kemp was a guardian of routine, of order, of quiet promises kept before breakfast. Once, years ago, a boy tried to steal a bottle, ran off with it laughing. Mr. Kemp had caught up to him, not to scold, not to beat, but to give him a second. "Take two," he'd said. "You look like you've got sisters." The boy had frozen, then nodded, took the bottles, vanished. The next morning, two empty ones sat neatly on the corner with a button and a copper penny. Payment, in a language only the street understood. Mr. Kemp had smiled then too, just slightly. As the fog began to thin and chimney smoke rose like prayers, he turned the cart toward Southwark. The air smelled of wet brick and bread. Molly snorted. "Almost done, girl," he whispered. At the end of the street, he saw a figure he knew. The sweet boy. Same face every day, always covered in soot, always coughing. Mr. Kemp reached into the crate, pulled a bottle with a bit more cream than usual, set it on the curb, didn't say a word, didn't need to. The boy nodded. London was too big for names sometimes, but it remembered kindness, even in silence. When the last bottle was placed and the last coin collected, Mr. Kemp turned the cart home. The bells stopped ringing. Molly walked slower, and behind him, the city roared to life. Trains and wheels, shouts and chimneys, boots and bargains. But ahead was only quiet, and for a few minutes more, he liked it that way. The fog in London was not just mist, it was memory, it was muscle, it was myth. They called it pea soup, though there was no warmth in it. It rolled in through chimneys, crept under doors, clung to faces like wet wool. It blurred the lines between buildings and people, between footsteps and whispers. And in the alley behind Clapham Road, it was alive. No one remembered the alley's name. It had one once, surely, painted on a sign nailed to brick, but time and smoke had eaten the letters. Now, people just called it that one behind the pub. It was narrow, slick, always a little damp. And this morning, it had swallowed a man whole. He lay slumped against the wall, face down, boot missing, hat crushed beside him like a broken crown. Was he drunk? Asleep? Dead? No one knew, and no one asked. Not in this part of town. The fog thickened around him, not maliciously, but indifferently. It didn't care what he'd done, or what had been done to him. It only cared to conceal, to make things soft, slow, forgettable. A rat darted past, then another. They didn't pause. The man didn't move. In a window above, a curtain fluttered. A child's eyes peeked through, then vanished. Somewhere beyond the alley, a cart rumbled. A bell rang. Voices shouted. But here it was quiet. Still. The kind of quiet that makes breath feel loud. A cat meowed once. No answer. Two women passed by the alley's mouth. One glanced in, the other tugged her arm. "Don't," she said. They kept walking, faster now. A constable arrived an hour later. He looked once, then again. Took out a notebook, wrote something, not much. "Unknown male, possible drink. We'll check back." He left. So did the fog, not all at once, but slowly, like a reluctant guest. And as it lifted, the man groaned. Once, twice, alive. He sat up, blinking. The alley came into view, brick, puddle, shadow, breath. He wiped his mouth, tasted copper, blood or gin, maybe both. He stood, wobbled, leaned, then walked. No destination, no apology, just movement. The alley was empty again, except for the hat, and the fog, thinning now. Sunlight, pale and unwelcome, touched the far wall. A boy ran past. Didn't look in, didn't need to. The alley had done its job. It had held the forgotten, cradled the broken, erased the name. It would do so again, tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Because in London, some places aren't part of the city. They're part of what it hides. Her name was Mercy, though no one had ever shown her any. She'd been left at the door of a foundling hospital when she was just days old, wrapped in a sheet that smelled of chimney ash and mold. There was no note, no locket, no hint of a name. So the nurses gave her one. Mercy, because irony is cheap. Mercy had outgrown the hospital. Not by age. She was still small, wiry, all elbows and knees, but by spirit. She ran away at 8, slipped out through a broken window while the other girls snored in a row like abandoned dolls. No one came after her. No one called her back, and Mercy never looked over her shoulder. She learned quickly that a smile could get you bread, but a glare could get you space. That if you looked half dead, people left you alone. But if you looked too alive, they might chase you. So Mercy became fog, not invisible, just hard to hold. She moved through the city like smoke under a door. A glance, a whisper, a name on someone else's lips, then gone. She slept near the grate off Drury Lane. It hissed steam from some buried pipe. The warmth was unreliable, but it was better than stone. She called it the throne, because in a city where everything hurt, you had to name something yours. Even a vent, even a lie. She met Tom there, the boy with no shoes. She liked him. Not because he was kind, though he was. Not because he shared his bread, though he did. But because he didn't talk unless there was something to say. And that was rare in a city that never shut up. That morning, she gave him a crust. He split it, of course. Gave half back. Idiot. She ate it anyway. They sat side by side like royalty in rags, watching smoke rise from the rooftops. Then she left. Business. Always business. Her business was scraps. Not food. Too risky. But fabric, metal, buttons, ribbons. Things people didn't care about until they needed them. She'd sell them to Old Nell down by the pump. Old Nell had one good eye and a ledger mind. She never overpaid. But she never shorted either. And Mercy respected that. She found a ribbon that morning. Blue, torn, smeared with something like ink. She wiped it clean, wrapped it around her wrist, kept walking. By the docks, she saw a man fall, just toppled forward like a felled tree. People stepped around him. One laughed. Mercy didn't stop, but she remembered his face. She remembered all their faces, because one day, someone would pay to hear who'd seen what, and when, and where, and Mercy would be ready. Information was currency, and Mercy was rich. She stole a potato, raw, small. She didn't even eat it, just held it, for later. For Tom. Maybe. If he hadn't wandered off again. He did that sometimes. Mercy never chased. People came back, or they didn't. That was life. By noon, she was tired. The fog had lifted, but the cold hadn't. The vent near Drury Lane still steamed. She sat, unwrapped the ribbon, tied it around her boot, the one with the hole in the toe. It looked ridiculous. She smiled, because sometimes ugly things deserve decoration, especially the ones that never got it. Tom returned, held out half a crust. No words. She took it. No thanks. Just a shared silence between orphans who understood that survival was its own form of prayer. And London was a god that never listened. The factory did not sleep. It only paused. And when it stirred, it groaned. Metal against metal, steam hissing like breath through rotten teeth. Then came the horn. Low, long, final. Not a question, a command. Time to work. Across the city it sounded, not once, but in waves. Textiles in Spitalfields, iron in Lambeth, matches in Bow, tin in Camden. The horns didn't ring together. They sang in discord, each one shouting, "Wake up, move up, Sirfa." In a tenement near Bethnal Green, Annie stirred. She was 12, or maybe 14. She didn't know anymore. She'd stopped counting birthdays the year her mother disappeared into the fog and didn't come back. She pulled on her boots, stiff with soot and something else, grabbed her shawl, wiped her mouth, coughed. Everyone coughed. It was the music of the morning. Her little brother Jamie whimpered. He was too young for work, too small, but not too small to worry. "Will they feed you today?" he asked. She didn't answer. just kissed his forehead and slipped out the door. The horn was still echoing. The day had begun. The factory floor was already warm. Not cozy, not safe, just hot. Too many bodies, too few windows. The foreman barked. Annie joined the line. Her station, spools and threads. Her job, keep them moving. If the thread broke, she fixed it. If the bobbin jammed, she cleared it. If her fingers bled, she kept going. The machines were loud. So loud they erased thought. That was the point. No talking, no thinking, only movement. She saw Mary across the way. Mary's hair was caught in a gear last week. She came back anyway. No one asked why. They never did. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. There was no clock, only the rhythm of the machine, the stutter and scream, the endless thrum of need. Annie didn't hate it. She didn't feel much at all. She just existed between breaks, and breaks were rare. At noon, they got a crust. Sometimes bread, sometimes nothing. Today, a crust. Hard, dry. Annie ate quickly. A rat scurried beneath the bench. No one screamed. The rats were part of the crew. They worked the edges, took what fell, like everyone else. Back on the floor, a boy collapsed. Too hot, too hungry, too tired. The foreman kicked him. No response. He was dragged to the side. Not out. Just aside. He'd get up later. Or he wouldn't. The line kept moving. By late afternoon, Annie's arms ached. Her eyes blurred. But the horn would sound again soon. The second horn. The one that meant escape. Or at least, the pause before it all began again tomorrow. She waited for it. Breathed in smoke. Sweat. Dust. Coughed. Waited. And then, it blew. The door opened. The girls filed out. Like ghosts. Like shadows. Like wind that knew it would return. Annie walked home. Boots scraping stone. Hands in pockets. Head down. The horn faded behind her. But inside her ears, it kept ringing. It always did. Even in sleep. Especially in sleep. At one table, soot. At another, sugar. Same city, same hour, different worlds. In a damp cellar beneath a meat shop in Southwark, 4 boys sat in a circle around a dented pot. The fire was nearly out. One flame, no smoke, no smell. Inside the pot, broth, if you could call it that. Mostly water, bits of bread, a scrap of carrot, the memory of meat. Tom was there. So was Mercy. 2 others they didn't know. Names didn't matter when you shared a pot. Tom dipped his crust in, softened it, chewed. Mercy licked her fingers. Someone had added salt. She didn't ask who, didn't care. Outside, the streetcar clanged past. Inside, the fire popped once, like it might give up. They leaned closer. Not for food, for heat. Above them, 2 floors up, in a parlor with polished glass and patterned carpet, sugar was being served. Fine white cubes, stacked in a silver dish shaped like a swan. Beside it, tea, real tea, not reused leaves, not boiled bark. Steam rose gracefully from china cups. A woman in lace gloves stirred twice and set the spoon aside. A man in a red waistcoat adjusted his cravat. Their daughter, pale, proper, bit into a scone topped with clotted cream. She asked about India. "Do the children there look like us?" Her mother laughed. "No, darling, but they work just as hard." The father chuckled. "We give them sugar, they give us wealth. It's rather tidy." The girl nodded. Dainty, doll-like, compliant. Below, Tom scraped the pot clean. Mercy licked the edge. One of the boys coughed, then again, and again. He turned away. No one flinched. Coughing was background noise now, like rats, like wind. In the parlor, another pot was brought in. Not broth. Chocolate. Hot. Thick, sweet. Poured into cups smaller than fists. Served with a curl of orange peel. The daughter smiled. Her teeth were perfect. The father passed her a paper. "Look," he said. They've opened another refinery on the docks. The girl sipped, nodded. Sugar, she thought, tasted like civility. Downstairs, Mercy touched her tongue to the bottom of the pot. Grimy, bitter, but familiar. She wiped her hands on her skirt. Tom stood, back to the street, back to motion. The boy who coughed stayed behind. No one asked why. Outside, the air was gray again. Not fog, not yet, just smoke. From chimney, from pipe, from breath. A man in a coat too fine for this street passed them. He wrinkled his nose. Filth, he muttered. Mercy smiled. Sugar's made in filth, she whispered. The man didn't hear. The man never would. He had no name. Not one he used, anyway. Some called him Oi. Others, you there. A few just whistled. But on his corner, at the crossing near the Strand, he was known simply as the sweeper. Small, dirty, fast, and always in motion. He held a broom taller than himself, frayed at the edges, more stick than bristle. It had once belonged to a stable boy. Before that, maybe a chimney sweep. Now it was his sword, and the street, his battlefield. Horse dung, rotten vegetables, coal dust, rain-mixed ash, all of it washed toward the feet of the fancy. Ladies in dresses wide as doorways, gentlemen with canes and silk gloves, clerks with pressed collars and eyes that didn't blink. The street was a mess, but their boots stayed clean. Thanks to him. He earned no wage, no employer, no uniform. But if he swept just before someone crossed, if he bowed just right, cleared the path with a flourish, sometimes a coin would drop, sometimes not, but he still swept, because motion meant money, and standing still meant being forgotten. His spot was between two lampposts. One leaned, one didn't. He measured the day by their shadows. When the leaning one's shadow touched the gutter, he could rest. Bit. Maybe. That morning, he'd earned 3 halfpennies and a curse. The curse came from a man in a hat too tall for his face. The coins came from an old woman who smiled without teeth. He preferred the woman. Obviously. At noon, it rained. Not heavy, just that misty London rain that soaked your bones without ever making a sound. He swept anyway. The rain made it worse, turned everything to mud. But it also softened the horse piles. Easier to move. Silver linings. In the stink. He didn't hate the work. He hated the looking. Not the looking down. No one ever looked down. But the looking past. Like he was smoke. Or a stain. Or something they'd rather forget existed. He got used to it. But some days he wished someone would just say, "Good sweep." Even that would be enough. A boy passed him around 2 o'clock. Shoeless, thin, eyes like his own. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The boy nodded. He nodded back. Recognition is its own kind of wealth. Once, a gentleman had stopped. Tall, with gloves, and an umbrella shaped like a hawk's head. The gentleman had said, "Doesn't it ever bother you, all that filth?" The sweeper had blinked, then grinned, and said, "Not if it pays, sir." The gentleman hadn't laughed, but he'd left a whole penny. The sweeper remembered that, for weeks. By evening, his arms ached. His fingers were raw, but his corner was clean. Cleaner than most. He'd earned 6 halfpennies, and 1 crust of bread tossed by a baker's boy who couldn't finish lunch. He ate it behind the leaning lamppost. Didn't chew. Just swallowed. Faster that way. When the last carriage rolled past, he sat. Not on the ground, too wet, on the edge of the curb. Feet in the gutter, hands on the broom. He watched the gas lamps flicker on, and for a moment, he felt rich. Not in coins, not in food, but in having a place, a corner, a job, purpose, however small, however dirty. The crossing was his, and in a city that trampled everything soft. That meant something. The envelope was thin, cream-colored once, now smudged with soot and the faintest trace of wax. There was no address, no stamp, no name, just 4 words, written in ink that had begun to fade. to the one I lost. It rested on the windowsill of a third-floor room in Clerkenwell. Forgotten, or maybe left there on purpose. The woman who wrote it was named Ada. She was not old, but life had folded her at the edges. The way rain folds paper left too long in the street. Ada worked as a seamstress, by candlelight, by gaslight, by the mercy of her eyes. She stitched things she'd never wear, for people she'd never meet. Dresses for ladies who dined at Claridge's, curtains for parlors that smelled of citrus and coal. Once, she sewed a wedding gown. It took 12 days, and she cried every night. She lived alone, not by choice, but by passage. There had been someone once, a boy with coal under his nails and a laugh that made windows rattle. They met on a bridge. He gave her an apple. She gave him her name. He left to find work in Liverpool. She never heard from him again. No shipwreck, no letter, just silence. She wrote the letter anyway, folded it 3 times, sealed it with candle wax, didn't mail it. Where would it go? To a boat lost in fog? To a street he never reached? She kept it, read it every year on the day they met. Not aloud, just with her eyes. And today was that day. Down below, the city roared. Carts, boots, voices shouting prices no one could afford. Up here, Ada dipped her pen. She didn't write anything, just watched the ink bead at the tip. Then she laid it down. She stood, opened the window. The wind took the curtain like a sigh. She picked up the letter, held it in both hands, ran her fingers over the creases, then let go. It didn't fly, it floated, down past brick and grime, past a woman hurrying with a basket, past a beggar curled by a drain. It landed in the street, was kicked, splashed, stepped on, but not torn, not yet. A boy picked it up, the sweeper, from the crossing. He turned it over, read the words. To the one I lost. He blinked, turned to the wind, looked up, but saw no one. He didn't open it. He didn't steal the paper or burn it for warmth. He set it back down, right on the step of number 9. Someone else would find it. Maybe. Or not. It didn't matter. Because even in a city as loud and fast and cruel as London, some things were still read, even if only by the street itself. They called them washerwomen, but no one ever called them by name. Their names didn't matter. Only their arms, their backs, their buckets. The river knew them. The river took their soap, their breath, their time, and gave back only damp cloth. In the shallows near Lambeth, the stones were slick with lichen and things best left unnamed. Still, the women stood there, boots in mud, hands raw, voices hoarse, scrubbing, rinsing, beating the filth out of other people's lives. One of them, Mary, was 40, or said she was. Her hands were older, her spine a question mark. She'd washed sheets for Parliament men, napkins stained with wine from men who made laws she couldn't read, silks from mistresses and undergarments from wives. No judgment, just soap, and cold, always the cold. Her daughter Ellie worked beside her, 16, maybe younger, cheeks red from wind, hair tied back with a scrap of curtain. He hated the water, but hated hunger more. So she dipped, scrubbed, wrung the cloth until her knuckles clicked. They didn't sing, not like in stories. No cheerful harmonies over the suds. No soft hums rising with the steam. Just breath, grunts, sometimes curses. Songs took too much energy, and no one was listening anyway. Nearby, a boy passed with a sack of coal. He glanced at them, then away, as if embarrassed, not by them, but by what they reminded him of. His mother's hands, the ones that stopped moving last winter. The women slapped shirts against stone. The sound echoed under the bridge. The river lapped. The wind bit. Someone dropped a pin. It vanished between rocks. Ellie swore. Mary handed her another. No words, no comfort, Sada. Just motion. Always motion. By late afternoon, the piles shrank. Dresses, trousers, blankets, one by one, made cleaner, though never truly clean. Nothing stayed clean in London, especially not hands, especially not hope. A cart rolled past above. Men shouted. Someone tossed a half-eaten pie into the river. The women didn't look up. They'd seen worse, been called worse, stepped through worse. Ellie paused once, not long, just enough to straighten her back, shake out her fingers. Mary caught her eye. Ellie didn't speak, but her face said it. How long? Mary didn't answer, not with words. She just handed her another shirt, and Ellie kept scrubbing. Because in London, questions didn't feed you. Only work did. As the sky dimmed and the wind stiffened, they packed up, wringing their skirts, pouring out buckets, gathering what little strength remained. The river swallowed their suds and kept flowing, like it always did. And the women. They walked home, not proud, not broken, just wet, cold, and still standing. A child's pocket is not like a grown-up's. It doesn't hold money or lists or keys to doors that always open. It holds pieces of a world too large, fragments, secrets, things not yet lost. In the alley near Spitalfields, a boy sat with his back to the wall. He was 7, or maybe 8, small either way. He wore a coat too long in the arms and too short in the waist. And in that coat, stitched by someone long gone, were pockets. 2 of them, heavy. The first held a marble, blue, cracked, found in the gutter outside a pawn shop. It didn't roll straight, but it caught the light in a way that made him feel like someone, somewhere once loved it. That was enough. Beside the marble, a bit of string, rough, knotted, tangled. He didn't remember where it came from, but he remembered wrapping it around his finger during long nights under wet eaves, like a ring, like a promise. He never said to whom, not even to himself. A button, too. Shiny, brass, no matching coat in sight. He'd found it near the steps of a theater. He'd imagined once that it had fallen from a prince's sleeve. That prince didn't miss it. But he treasured it, called it lucky. It never proved it, but never failed either. Some things were just meant to stay. In the other pocket, bread, stale, cracked at the edge, wrapped in a page from a book. The words meant nothing to him, but the crust was real, solid, tradable. Sometimes he ate it. Sometimes he gave it to the girl with the twisted ankle near the old brewery. She never said thank you. He never asked. It was a kind of prayer, given and gone. The page, though, that he kept, even after the bread was gone. The ink blurred with rain. The letters curled like sleeping cats. But it felt like knowledge. He couldn't read it, but it meant someone could. That someone might. That maybe one day he would too. And finally, at the very bottom, beneath the crumb, the thread, the button and glass, a pebble. Round, smooth, from a place he barely remembered. The edge of a field, or a park, or a grave. He didn't know why he kept it. Only that when he held it, he felt less empty. That mattered. The boy sat quietly now, pockets full, stomach near empty. The city roared around him. Wheels, steam, voices. But inside his coat, a world, a quiet one. Not of wealth, but of meaning. Little things that no one could steal, because no one else could understand why they mattered. A man passed. Didn't look. A girl skipped by. Didn't pause. The boy pulled his coat tighter, tucked his hands into the fabric like a fortress, and waited. For night. For bread. For something else small to find. Because in London, what you carried often meant more than what you had. And in a pocket, you could carry hope. The cleaver hit bone with a sound you didn't forget. Not a snap, not a crack. More like a thud, followed by silence. Like the room itself held its breath for just a moment. Then movement resumed. The saw, the scrape, the thump of slabs on the counter. Welcome to the butcher's shop. Joseph had worked there since he was 9. He was 13 now, or maybe 12. No one kept track, except Mr. Lowry, the butcher. And he only cared about the number of hours, not the number of birthdays. Joseph arrived before the sun most mornings. He scrubbed the counters, swept the floor, hauled water. Then he brought out the cuts. Shoulder, rump, loin, neck. He could name them all, could point to them on a pig hanging from a hook and say, "That's threepence a pound." He'd never eaten them, not once. There was always blood, on the block, on the saw, on his sleeves, under his nails. At first, he tried to wash it away. Now, he just let it dry. What was the point? Even the flies knew it wasn't going anywhere. Customers came in waves. Early risers first, servants sent with precise orders. Later, the housewives with bonnets and baskets. And always, always the hungry ones who stared too long at the scraps bin. Joseph had learned to spot them. He gave them extra gristle when Mr. Lowry wasn't looking. Pretended it was a mistake. Sometimes it was, but not often. "Don't soften, boy," Mr. Lowry had said once. "This city eats the soft." Joseph believed him, but still, he softened, quietly. At midday, he sat on a crate behind the shop. The alley smelled worse than the meat, but it was quiet. He chewed a crust, swallowed a gulp of water, wiped his hands on his apron and listened. Horses, bells, a baby crying somewhere 2 buildings over. Life as usual. He heard a girl laugh once. Not behind the shop, in the street. Sharp. Sudden. He didn't look up, but he remembered it for the rest of the day. Because it was rare. And because it wasn't meant for him. In the afternoon, a delivery came. A half cow. Skinned. Heavy. Joseph and Mr. Lowry hauled it in. The meat was warm. And it shouldn't have been. That meant it had been hung too short a time. But meat was meat. And people were hungry. As the sun dipped, he washed the knives. 12 of them, each with a name. Joseph didn't know the names, but Mr. Lowry did. Spoke to them sometimes, as if they were old friends or old enemies. By the time he finished, the sky was bruised purple. The street smelled of coal and damp bread and pipe smoke. Joseph stepped outside. The city yawned in steel and soot. He tucked a scrap of fat into his pocket for a stray dog that lived 2 corners down. The dog never barked. It just watched and waited, like everything else in London. The river didn't speak. It didn't roar or sing. It didn't call or warn. It only moved. Always forward, always brown, always thick with things best not named. The Thames had its moods. Morning, cold, soft, silent. Midday, restless, crowded, clanging with steam and shouts. But by late afternoon, it sighed. Not loudly, just enough to let you know it remembered. Everything. On the south bank, a man stood smoking beside a stack of crates. He worked the docks, or had, or claimed to. No one asked. His eyes were red. From drink, from smoke, from grief. Maybe all 3. The boat behind him hissed. A paddle steamer. Not new, but still proud. He didn't board it. He never did. He just watched them leave. One after another, always away. Children played near the embankment. Not really played. More like hovered. Looking for loose rope. Half loaves. A dropped coin. One girl balanced on a timber beam and called herself Queen. Her feet were black with mud. Her voice was hoarse, but for a moment she ruled. And no one stopped her. Further along, a couple sat with their backs to a mooring post. The man had a harmonica. The woman, a tin cup. They didn't speak. He played, she collected. The song wasn't happy, wasn't sad, just there, like the river. The smoke curling from chimneys that leaned into the sky like questions. A ferry passed under Blackfriars Bridge. The oarsman rowed without urgency. His passengers didn't talk. One man read a paper. Another stared at the water as if expecting it to answer something. It didn't. Of course it didn't. From the east, barges pushed coal. Black mountains under blacker sky. From the west, Packets carried letters written in ink that would never dry properly in the fog. And in between, the river carried it all. Smoke, secrets, sick dreams, and the city drank it in, day after day, year after year, without ever choking. On the north bank, near an old chain yard, a boy carved initials into a plank. Not his own, someone else's. He didn't know what they meant, but he carved them anyway. Because in a place where nothing stayed still, something had to. Even if it was just 3 letters in wet wood, the sun began to fade. Not like in the country, in gold or orange. Here, it faded into gray, into chimney soot and steamboat breath, into cloud that never moved. The river didn't notice. It only kept flowing, carrying tomorrow, swallowing yesterday, and leaving behind just enough mist to remind everyone that London never really ended. It just dissolved. The tunnel narrowed. The air grew warmer, brighter. He could almost see the mouth of the cave ahead. Sunlight. Life. He smiled. And behind him, a stumble. A gasp. His name, barely a whisper. Orpheus. His heart ached. His foot froze. He knew the rule. But love is louder than logic. And so, he turned. For one moment, they saw each other. Truly. Her eyes wide, his hand outstretched. And then, she faded. Like breath on a mirror. Like smoke through fingers. Gone. No scream, no sound. Just silence again. But this time, cruel. Empty. Final. Orpheus fell to his knees. Not because he had lost her, but because he had done it with his own hands. He did not speak on the way back. The lyre hung from his hand. Strings broken, frame cracked. Cerberus watched him pass without growl. Charon ferried him without payment. The river wept for him. Even the shadows seemed to step aside. He emerged into light. Alone. The forest did not welcome him. The birds did not sing. Only the wind moved. Soft, but colder now. He sat by the tree where they once met, played broken notes, not to bring her back, but to remember her face. He sang of the way she looked at flowers, the way she never interrupted silence, the way her hands felt like home. The world listened and wept. Even the gods said nothing, because sometimes even gods can do nothing. They say he never loved again, that his music grew quieter, that even the animals stopped gathering. He walked the forests, not to find her, but to stay close to where she once was. Some say he vanished. Others say he was torn apart by madness. But those who listen carefully, on windless nights, say they still hear him, playing, humming, searching for her, in song. One day, the lyre was found, beside a stone, beneath a tree, alone. The strings were still, but the wood was warm, as if it had just been played. And those who found it said they heard something, not sound, but a memory, a feeling, of love, of loss, of silence that once was full. And though Orpheus was gone, the song never truly ended, because every time we speak their names, they are remembered. And in that remembering, they live.